Our next speaker is Sam Shoge. And I will say I had to make sure I got that pronunciation right. When you got a name like Rao, it never gets pronounced right, so I'm very conscious of that. Sam serves as the Economic Development Coordinator for the Talbot County Department of Economic Development and Tourism. Sam's going to share his perspective on economic development on the Midshore, and he's also going to touch on the impact of the growing millennial workforce. Sam?
Well, good morning, everyone. I just want to thank SVN, Rao Engineering, and KRM Development Corporation for sponsoring this fantastic event. I'm from the Shore. I've lived here my entire life. I actually live right up in Chestertown with my wife, and I love having the opportunity to have these types of conversations and to participate in these forums, because the Eastern Shore is an exciting place, and it's an exciting place to be, it's an exciting place to live, and more people really need to know about that, especially the millennial generation. So being a millennial, I am here to have a little conversation with you about the overall millennial influence. Now, the way we're going to go about this is we're going to start off at the 30,000 feet level. We're going to look at it as an entire generation. We're going to delve into some of the things that you need to know, some of the things that you think you know, but you really don't. We're going to have that conversation too. And then at the end, we're really going to tie it all together as it relates and pertains to the Eastern Shore. So let's go ahead and dive right on in. And it wasn't until I got up here and I'm standing in front of you did I realize how big of an undertaking this is, because I'm going to attempt to speak on the behalf of 71 million people. So bear with me. So I think it's important to start off with, what are those common misconceptions that older generations have with millennials? And I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand if you have ever thought these. You can keep those thoughts to yourself. But I'm here to tell you that we as millennials have heard all of these things multiple times. We're a handout generation. We're lazy. We don't know the value of hard work. And we're snowflakes, whatever that means. So we've heard it before, we've heard it multiple times. It's gotten to the point where whenever I'm having a conversation and somebody says the word millennial, I cringe because I just assume they're about to say something negative. So what's a presentation without a good meme? If you don't know what a meme is, I can't help you. Google it. But here's what the older generations tend to think of millennials. We see the world's problems, and we do nothing but complain about them. So it's just an interesting take on the overall perception of young people these days from the generation. So much so that I wanted to kind of put this into another perspective of going to Google, typing in millennials are, and essentially letting Google finish the rest. Millennials are killing mayonnaise, killing Hooters, killing divorce, not necessarily a bad thing to kill, aren't having babies. Millennials screwed Reddit. And take a look at this bottom section right here where it says, report inappropriate predictions. Well, can we report all of those predictions? So when you talk so much about this negativity and you put a lot of that burden on an entire generation, is it any wonder why so many millennials don't even claim to be millennials? When all you hear is negativity, and you know that you are living your life in a different way, you don't associate with that crowd. And that's why it is reflected from this Pew Research that 40% of millennials that fall within the overall generation don't even claim to be a part of it. Here's why. Here's a cover of Time magazine. The me generation. Millennials are lazy, entitled, narcissist, who still live with their parents. At least they threw in why they'll save us all at the end, okay? This is a 2013 cover, but it gets interesting. Take a look at this 2005 cover. Meet the Twixers, young adults who live off their parents, bounce from job to job, and hop from mate to mate. They're not lazy, they just won't grow up. 2005. Sounds pretty familiar to the 2013 cover. Let's go back even further to 1990. 20-something. Laid back, late blooming, or just lost. Overshadowed by the baby boomers, America's next generation has a hard act to follow. You baby boomers are really full of yourselves. So I wonder, what did the greatest generation who brought the baby boomers into existence, what did they have to think about the baby boomer generation? We can only assume. You know, this is the generation that survived through the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. They had to stand in soup lines. Then they rallied and fought in World War II, defeated the Nazis, defeated the Japanese, stormed the beaches of Normandy, and then came back home and essentially laid the foundation for modern America, built our highways, built our suburbs, laid down so much infrastructure. Turns out, this is what they thought of the baby boomers. The me generation. And you can look this up. It's right on Wikipedia. A term referring to baby boomers, the phrase caught on at a time when self-realization was becoming cultural aspirations for the young, ranked higher than social responsibility. So we can see, now yes, it's from Wikipedia, you can take that as you like. I don't care. I just figured, let me share it with you. But let's go back a little further. A letter to the editor submitted to The Atlantic described the rising generation as shallow, amusement-seeking, and selfish. So, to make a long story short, literally everything you think and assume about millennials, the previous generation thought about your generation, and it goes all the way back to antiquity. I almost included a quote from Socrates where he was essentially bemoaning the generation and how they don't respect their elders, so on and so forth. But I tried to do my due diligence. I tried to see if that quote was actually attributed to Socrates, and the internet had a hard time attributing it to Socrates or Plato or to some other philosopher, so I didn't include it. But you get the point. Every generation thinks the next generation is lazy, entitled, and doesn't respect their elders. So now that we've gotten all of those misconceptions out of the way, let's actually delve into what it means to be a millennial today. So the Pew Research, they have defined millennials as being born between 1981 and 1996. Every resource out there kind of says something a little bit differently, but the overall consensus is we're talking about a generation that was born in the early 80s to the mid or late 90s. So that means the oldest are 37 years old in our generation, 37 years old, and the youngest are about 22. We are the most racially and ethnically diverse adult generation in the country. And in fact, the next generation, Generation Z, is even more diverse than the millennials. And we numbered 71 million people in 2016. Hence my slight anxiety of trying to speak on behalf of 71 million people. So we're going to surpass the baby boomers as the largest generation in 2019. That's next year, folks. And I'm sure many of you have millennials in the workplace. Some of them might even be in leadership and managerial roles. It's happening, and you see why, because of our overall numbers. So delving a little bit deeper, millennials are highly educated. We're the highest educated generation. 29% of men and 36% of women held bachelor's degrees. This is compared to the baby boomers, where 22% of men and 20% of women held bachelor's degrees. So we're highly educated, and we're also highly urban, where 84% of our generation lives in urban areas, compared to 68% of baby boomers at that same age. And one thing that we don't get enough credit for is that we really straddled two generations. We straddled the overall traditional upbringing, but that was also balanced out by our exposure to technology. So as a kid, here are all the things that were a part of our childhood. Streetlights. We all had our moms say, "Be home before the street lights came on." You know, that's something that older generations always refer to back in their day when they played outside. Turns out millennials did the exact same thing. Also, floppy disks. Remember those? That was the first storage device that I actually used, where the overall storage was 1.44 megabytes. To put that into perspective, a single iPhone picture today would not be able to fit on a floppy disk. But that's what we had. That's what we had when we were growing up. The internet came in CDs from AOL. You had to dial up into the internet, and you couldn't stay on for very long because you would tie up the phone lines. That was our introduction to technology. And then, of course, the old school Nokia cell phones. Those were our first mobile devices. So we were all kind of brought into this technology together. The iPhone didn't come out until 2007, folks. I didn't have a smartphone with a data plan until I graduated from college. So it's just one of those interesting things that's also tacked on to our generation, that we're obsessed with smartphones and we're always on our gadgets. Well, we all kind of got introduced to the iPhone and those gadgets together. So the most important defining characteristic, though, about the millennial generation is that we came of age and entered the workforce during the height of the Great Recession. And that's what we're really going to delve into. That impacted our overall economic outlook significantly. 18% of us faced unemployment in 2010, and that's unemployment. Once you factor in underemployment, that overall rate skyrockets. 2/3 of us have long-term debt, and this isn't long-term debt that is tied into a mortgage. This is student loans. This is credit cards. 30% of us live with our parents. I had to move in with my parents when I graduated from college. I lived at home for 4 years, and I certainly would not have been able to lay an economic foundation for myself if I didn't have that ability to move back home. And 33% of us believe our local community is still in recession, and this is despite nearly 10 years of economic expansion after the recovery. 1/3 of us still believe that recession is still going on in our local communities, which is really telling. So let's talk about student loans a little bit, because this is really important. 52% of millennials have taken on student loans, and our overall average student loan debt when we graduate is nearly $33,000. When I graduated from Elon University in 2011, I graduated with about $32,500 in student loan debt. I'm not ashamed to admit it. Believe it or not, I went to Elon tuition-free. That $32,000 came exclusively from room and board and studying abroad. My wife graduated with a little bit more, so we were staring down about $70,000 to $80,000 in student loans when we graduated, and when we were entering into the workforce, that equals about $700 a month in student loan payments. Hence why so many of us have to move back home with our parents. $700 per month is substantial. 51% of us don't even believe that the benefit of going to college and taking out all of those student loan debts to pay for it is even going to be worth it in the end. So now what's interesting is you have a very highly educated generation that is looking on their overall college experience with a little bit of regret. And that's sad because we live in a time where a college degree is incredibly important for the overall advancement of your career. And 43% of us believe student debt has limited our career options. Now, I'm not here to tell you that every single millennial has student loans, because that's not the case. So I don't want you to look at every single young person with pity. But what I am trying to tell you is these are the economic realities that many people in my generation are living with. And it is backed up with data. So take a look at this quote from the Economic Innovation Group. No generation has entered the labor market further behind thanks to student loans or with dimmer prospects thanks to falling wages. Adjusted for inflation, millennials make $2,000 less than they would have in 1980. So not only are we graduating with significant amounts of student loan debts, but we're also making less money in those entry-level jobs. So if all of this sounds depressing, it should be, because those are the realities that, again, many of our generation is living with. 35% claim to just make enough to cover expenses. And 63% would have difficulty covering an unexpected $500 expense. Difficulty as in they would have to ask money from their parents. They would have to put that expense on a credit card. That means that money is not saved. But what's even more sad is about half of the country falls in that category. Half of the population in the United States would have difficulty covering an unexpected $500 expense. That's very telling. 79% worry they can't afford retirement. And take a look at healthcare. 74% worry they won't be able to pay their healthcare bill if they get sick. So these are what's on our mind. This is what's keeping us up at night. So here's another meme for you. You'll appreciate this. Why old people are tired all the time. They're old. Why I, a millennial, am tired all the time. Lack of decent income despite years of higher education and overqualification for jobs, working multiple part-time hour jobs to pay back loans for obtaining said degree at higher education institution, stressing over being a 20-something who still lives at home because I can't afford my independence due to student loans, fighting constantly against a system that keeps the line between rich and poor so bolded. Why old people think I am tired. Selfies, the internet, caffeine. So folks, all of this is to say that, the economic realities that we're living with are impacting literally every major life point. Down to when we buy automobiles, we only made up 27% of the new automobile sales in 2014 compared to 38% for Gen X when they were our age. Obviously, we're getting much older when we are getting married for the first time. The average is 27 for women, 29 and a half for men, compared to 21 and 23 back in 1965. 65% of us are under the age of 35 are renting versus 57% just in 2006, so not that long ago. And the average age for a first-time mother in 2013 was 26, compared to 22.7 in 1980. So all of this is depressing, and as a country, we know it. 15% of the country believe today's children would not be better off than their parents. That's very scary, folks. So what are we doing to make ends meet? We're hustling. 50% responded to a survey saying that they have a side hustle. That is the modern term for a side job, a gig, a part-time job, if you will. So we are working outside of our full-time jobs just to make ends meet. And of course, the leading reason is to have more money so we can pay bills. And we average about $250 per month from those side hustles. I went through my overall network and just noted what my peers are doing outside of their overall full-time job. And really, without even having to try too hard, here are all the careers or side hustles that I came up with that I know that they're working on. Photography, copywriting, fitness instructing, event planning, property management, YouTube influencer. Now, that one's really interesting. This colleague of mine has 30,000 followers on his YouTube channel. And it turns out what he was YouTubing about directly correlated with his overall full-time job. He pitched his company to allow him to essentially take over their marketing, create their videos, and really help tell their story. They just weren't into that type of stuff. So what did he do? He quit, because clearly his passion was for creating video, producing content on the particular subject that he had a deep interest in, but his company didn't harness that and they didn't leverage it, so he left. So take a look. This is what we're doing. We are creating value outside of our full-time job. As business leaders, as owners of companies, if you have a millennial working in your staff, it's important to know what they're working on and how can you harness, how can you take advantage of what they're doing in this side in your business. Because if it's photography, if it's social media management, those are all things that your business can directly benefit from, and we'll get to that in just a second. So on average, we spend about 12 hours per week on these side projects. So like I mentioned earlier, the best way to really get the millennials involved in your overall workplace is to leverage their skills and to really have an idea of where they're coming from. Hence the reason why we had to do a deep dive into some of those general characteristics and general traits that the generation shares. So this is the number one thing that millennials are asking for in a working environment. They are looking for passion. We're the first generation to grow up with the internet, and with the internet came exposure to a lot of things, such as the world's mounting problems and the sheer number of ways that you can go about potentially solving and fixing and helping meet those challenges in the future. So 74% of us, according to a World Economic Forum survey, want to know that their work matters. It's very important to us as a generation to know that we are making a difference not only for your bottom line as a business, but for our community and, in many cases, for the world. Now, a lot of this can be reflected in the overall job description. Take a look at the top here. This is a job description for an underwriter. Analyzes commercial line accounts to make decisions based on individual risk characteristics, exposure analysis, hazard recognition and controls, utilizes underwriting guidelines and company best practices to ensure compliance with state regulations. Within delegated authority levels and continuous process improvement workplace principles, accepts, rejects, or modifies new and renewal business to ensure a profitable book of business. Who on earth would want to apply for a job like that? okay? So remember, we are seeking purpose and we are seeking passion. Now, here's that same job description with the overall purpose clearly articulated. Do your friends rely on you to know the answer to their random questions? I'm listening. I don't have my glasses, so I need to step closer. Is one of your catchphrases, "Let me Google that"? It is. When you're out and about, do you notice unsafe conditions or people taking unnecessary risks? I do. That's why I usually pull out my phone so I can record them when they do something dumb. At Acme Mutual Company, our underwriters are encouraged to do their homework. They serve as an advisor to producers and make million-dollar decisions on behalf of the company every day. In this role, it is essential to have a thirst for knowledge and a love for research. Now, you don't have to be a millennial. I don't care what generation you're in. Given the choice between those two job descriptions, which job would you apply for? Raise your hand if you would apply for job 1. Raise your hand if you would apply for job 2. So, companies, it's great to write a very compelling job description that really articulates the purpose and the passion for the job and the candidate that you're looking for, but you've got to follow that up and practice what you preach. So millennials believe they can contribute meaningful to the world, and they hold companies to the same standard. And 82% of millennials say it's important to promote the health and wellness of consumers and employees. Generally, environmental responsibility and volunteering with charities are causes widely supported by millennials. Emphasis on environmental responsibility. If you don't believe this, ask the oil and gas industry and why they're having such a terrible time replacing retiring baby boomers with millennials. Because, take a look at this headline that ran in Business Insider. Why millennials are snubbing jobs in the oil industry. Turns out it goes against the overall general welfare that millennials have for society and the planet. So you've articulated your purpose, you've captured, the passion that the right candidate could have for the job. You've articulated that into a compelling job description. You practice what you preach. You're socially responsible from a corporate perspective. You support charities. What else do millennials need in the workplace? They need a good work environment. And this is especially telling. Millennials are willing to make $7,600 less in salary to work for a company with a better environment. So despite having a lot of student loan debts, despite making $2,000 less than we would have in 1980, we're still willing to make less money to work in a company that has a great work environment. And when I say work environment, I do not mean beanbags and video games and snacks and beer, things that have been very popularized by Silicon Valley. What we're talking about when we say a productive work environment is, take a look at this chart from the Harvard Business Review. The number one thing that millennials are requesting is the opportunity to learn and to grow. How are you engaging us from a professional development perspective to help us harness our passion and catapult our careers? That's the number one thing that we're looking for. And you see the spread between the level of importance that millennials rank that versus the level of importance baby boomers rank that. So we want the opportunity to develop ourselves professionally. We have a passion for leadership. We want to be groomed, we want to be mentored, and we need that overall feedback of what we're doing, that, yes, our work is appreciated, it is making an impact, it is making a difference. Here's why. All of those are feedbacks that really resonates with us. We're not asking for a trophy or a ribbon or a star. Let me make that very clear, but productive feedback is good. Productive feedback outside of the once a year annual review that you have to do with all of your employees. And followed very closely behind that, again, this is still the work environment. It's a quality manager, and it's the quality of management. We want our managers, we want our bosses, we want our leaders to be accessible. We want to be able to communicate with them. We want to have be able to champion the overall mission of the organization. All of that is very contagious, and we really believe that. And one of the best managers that I've had fit all of those criterias. Was very accessible, provided very helpful feedback, and his overall enthusiasm for the mission and for the company was infectious. And guess what? We performed, because it was a predominantly a millennial workplace, we performed extraordinarily well, and the results really did speak for themselves. Now, overall compensation, because that's another misconception, millennials, they can't wait to get a raise, and they're always asking for more money. In reality, that actually ranks quite low compared to the opportunity for professional development and the overall quality in our management. So this is what we mean when we say a good and productive work environment, and not the bean bags, and not the video game and the ping pong. Because look, informal work environment, organization is a fun place to work. Those are actually the lowest. So we don't care about those things. They're fun, So I'm going to speed through the last remaining slides here. We can't forget about technology. So that is also a part of a good and productive work environment. Get rid of the filing shelves. Get rid of the desktop computers. Give me a laptop. Unchain me from this desk, because I love to collaborate. I love the ability to move around. Sometimes you just need a change of environment. You need a change of pace. So having the ability to pick up your laptop, go into the conference room, or go into a different part of the office, go into a lounge, all of those things are very helpful for my productivity. Can't necessarily say that for 71 million millennials. We're all a little bit different, but generally speaking, we respond very positively to technology. 42% of us would leave our current jobs because of substandard technology, compared to only 25% of respondents who were over 35. Furthermore, 82% of us would let workplace tech influence our overall decision-making process when we're picking a new job, compared to only 67% of people who were 35 years and older. So you have the ability to leverage that technology. You're unchained, if you will, from your desk. You have the ability to move around, collaborate with your peers. Also, companies that Instagram or otherwise share photos of their office life, their culture, their extracurriculars. When you're going out and supporting charities, are you taking pictures of that? Are you showing this is what we also do? Again, it's not just about the bottom line, it's about the impact that you can make as an employee in your community as well. And if you're able to capture those, you can make a difference when it comes to attracting employees. Because personally, when I'm doing a job search, I'm not just going to LinkedIn or Indeed or Monster. I'm also typing in that company on Facebook. I'm typing them in on Instagram. I'm going to YouTube, seeing what content they have. I want to see what my potential coworkers look like. I want to see what the office environment looks like. So that's also all the research that I'm doing in addition to applying for your job. So leveraging that skill makes a difference. All of this to say that it pays dividends, and this is where we get to how it pertains to the Eastern Shore. 64% of millennials would move to a different part of the country for better job access and opportunity Furthermore, 63% would add an hour to their commute for a better job. So when we mentioned earlier that 84% of us are urban, and as it pertains to the Eastern Shore, where your 3 oldest counties in Maryland are right here on the Eastern Shore, if 63% of millennials respond saying they're willing to commute an extra hour, you draw an hour radius around the Eastern Shore, and you're starting to get into some pretty populated metro areas. So when it comes to businesses saying we're having a difficult time recruiting millennials, we're having a difficult time recruiting younger talent, well, what are the things that you're doing to implement to make your overall work environment more attractive to the next generation? Because clearly it states right here that we're willing to make the sacrifice of relocating across the country or even adding an extra hour to our commute to work for the right environment, for the right company in the right environment. So purpose, professional development, and we can't forget about profit. Because at the end of the day, a lot of us, we've got bills to pay. Only 29% of millennials feel like they are engaged at their job. So when you have 70% who feel unengaged, it kind of goes back to Secretary Gill's initial comments about, unlocking potential. If you're not harnessing and unlocking the potential of your employees, you're losing profits, you're losing value as a company. You really need to figure out what engages, and I'm wrapping up, Bob, I see you giving me the look. What engages us? And it goes back to what we previously mentioned about the work environment, providing clear purpose and passion. Turns out, if you do all those things, we are remarkably loyal. So much so that 67% say being loyal to their employer is important to them, which is on par with previous generations. So much for, millennials lack loyalty. We clearly rank that as very high in our overall importance. We just need the mechanisms to facilitate that. So like I mentioned earlier, the Eastern Shore, we really need to better attract the millennial generation with the revitalization that's going on in Cambridge, with what Bob is going to talk about next with the Chesapeake Triangle, with the overall changes that we're making in healthcare. Those are things that are I think, going to help move the needle, but it comes down to you and your work environment and your business. What strategies are you going to implement to make that overall change, to help support all of these various initiatives that are going on, so that we can make the Eastern Shore a very desirable and attractive place for not just retirees, but for millennials as well. So I hope I did a sufficient job talking on behalf of 71 million people. I'm looking at the millennials here in the room. I hope I'm seeing some head nods from you guys. So thank you all very much. There's my contact information. I'm on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Sam, that was great. I think that if you are the representation of our millennials, then everybody here wants to hire a millennial. And I will tell you, I have some contact and connection with the millennials. I've got a millennial son. He doesn't live at home, but we are a growing business with a lot of technology, and our business is growing around the millennials. We've got an amazing group of young professionals that have chosen to come to the Eastern Shore to work. And many of the comments that you made regarding salary range, they could go be in Baltimore, Washington, make more money, lifestyle, quality, it's all exactly as you've said. And I think that I overheard you say, with a lot of energy and likes a deadline. Would you start at 5 this morning working on this? Is that what you said? Oh, you finished at 5. So the work ethic that we see is just amazing. And while I call our group the vintage consulting team, our millennial consulting team keeps the vintage guys awake, excited, and feeling young. So thank you.